Red Bull just ran a secret test, and what Verstappen drove was so unexpected, rival teams are already questioning everything they thought about the RB22. No announcement. No media. No warning. Just one car on track, hiding changes that could be worth more than half a second per lap. Because this was not a normal upgrade. This was a correction. A car that started the season missing key aerodynamic elements, suddenly running them now, something that should never happen at this level. And that is why this moment matters. Because when Red Bull starts fixing fundamentals mid-season, it means the original design was never fully right. Now they are trying to recover lost performance, fix instability, and give Verstappen a car he can finally trust. But inside these changes, there is one hidden upgrade, the one no camera could clearly capture. The one that could either bring them straight back to the front, or confirm that their biggest weakness was built into the RB22 from day one. At first, most people missed it. The images were unclear. The angles were limited. Nothing looked dramatic. But inside Formula One, engineers do not look for drama. They look for details. And the moment those details became visible, the reaction changed. Because the front wing on that RB22 was no longer the same. Small additions. Subtle shapes. Tiny elements placed with precision. The kind of changes that casual viewers ignore. But the kind that engineers immediately question. Because those pieces were not new ideas. They were already standard across the grid from the very beginning of the season. Red Bull did not have them. Now they do. And that is where the real story begins. Because in Formula One, you do not remove performance by choice. If something is missing, it is because something else forced you to remove it. And that something else was inside the RB22 from day one. Wait. The car was heavier than expected. Not by a small margin. By enough to cost serious lap time every single lap. And when a car carries extra weight, everything changes. Balance shifts. Tire behavior changes. Aerodynamics stop working the way they were designed to. So engineers are forced into compromise. You cannot fix the weight instantly. So you adapt everything around it. You simplify the aero. You reduce load in key areas. You make the car easier to control, even if it becomes slower. That is exactly what Red Bull did at the start of the season. They held the car back, just to keep it stable. Now at Silverstone, they are trying to undo that decision. Bringing those elements back. Trying to recover the performance they sacrificed. But this is where the situation becomes dangerous. Because adding performance is easy. Controlling it is not. If the underlying balance is still wrong, those new elements will not fix the car. They will expose it. Make it more sensitive. More unpredictable. Harder to drive at the limit. And that is why Verstappen was the only driver on track. Not for convenience. For clarity. Because when a car behaves inconsistently, you need one voice. One reference. One driver capable of feeling every small change. Every improvement, or every new weakness. And Verstappen is that driver. Every lap he completed at Silverstone was answering one question. Is the car finally becoming predictable? Or is it still hiding something deeper? But here is where everything shifts. Because what we saw on that front wing is only the surface. The visible part of a much bigger transformation. The real change, the one that could define the entire season, is happening somewhere no camera could clearly capture that day. And once you understand that hidden area, you begin to see why this situation is far more serious than just a slow start. There is one part of the RB22 that no one could truly see in those Silverstone images. Not the front wing. Not the visible bodywork. The floor. And this is where everything changes. Because in modern Formula One, the floor is not just important. It is everything. It controls how air moves under the car. It generates most of the downforce. It defines whether the car feels planted or completely unpredictable. And right now, that is exactly where Red Bull has been struggling. The RB22 was built around an aggressive concept. Extremely tight packaging. Very narrow side pods. A design that pushes airflow to its limits. On paper, it looked efficient. On track, it became unstable. The airflow underneath the car does not stay consistent. One corner feels strong. The next, completely different. And that creates the worst possible situation for a driver. Uncertainty. Because when you turn into a corner, you cannot hesitate. You either commit or you lose time. And that commitment only comes from trust. If the car reacts differently each lap, the trust disappears. And when that happens, even Verstappen has to hold back. Slightly earlier braking. Slightly less aggression on entry. Tiny corrections that cost tenths without anyone noticing. This is why the Silverstone test was never about raw speed. It was about understanding. Every lap Verstappen completed was a question. Is the rear stable now? Is the balance consistent? Does the car respond the same way every single time? And if the answer is no, then the problem is not just an upgrade issue. It is a concept issue. Because you can change wings. You can reduce weight. You can adjust airflow on the surface. But if the floor itself is unstable, you are not fixing the car. You are chasing a moving problem. Now here is where things become even more serious. Because there is another issue directly connected to this design. Cooling. The tighter the packaging, the harder it is to manage temperature. And that is exactly what Red Bull has been dealing with. Heat building up. Systems under pressure. Performance being limited just to keep the car alive. There were moments already where the car could not be pushed. Where power had to be reduced. Where performance had to be sacrificed. Not because the engine is weak. In fact, the engine is competitive. That is what makes this even more frustrating. The power is there. But the chassis cannot fully use it. And when cooling becomes unstable, everything else starts to collapse. Efficiency drops. Balance shifts. Confidence disappears even further. So now, everything connects. An unstable floor. An aggressive design. Cooling limitations. Weight compromises. All interacting at the same time. This is not one problem. It is a system under pressure. And what Red Bull tested at Silverstone was not just an upgrade. It was an attempt to stabilize that entire system. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If the foundation of that system is wrong, no upgrade will fully fix it. It will improve things. It will make the car better. But it will never unlock its full potential. And that leads to a deeper question. One that goes beyond Silverstone, beyond Miami, beyond this entire update package. Why did Red Bull choose this concept in the first place? Because once you understand that decision, you begin to see that everything happening now was set in motion long before the RB22 ever touched the track. The answer goes back to a moment that did not look important at the time. A quiet decision. Made months before the RB22 ever touched the track. At the end of last season, Red Bull had a choice. Shift early to the new car. Or keep pushing the old one, chasing one more title. They chose to keep fighting. They extended development. They delayed the transition. They stayed focused on the present, while others moved to the future. And in Formula One, that is where everything can change. Because development is not just about what you build. It is about when you build it. While Red Bull was still extracting performance from the previous car, other teams were already defining their next concept. They had more time. More simulations. More validation. By the time Red Bull fully committed to the RB22, they were already behind in the most critical phase. Concept definition. That moment where you decide how the car will behave for the entire season. And once that decision is locked, you cannot go back. You can only adjust around it. That is why so many problems appeared at the same time. Weight issues, aerodynamic imbalance, cooling limitations, an unpredictable floor. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when a project is compressed. When decisions are made faster than they should be. When there is no time to fully understand the consequences. The RB22 was not built slowly and refined. It was built under pressure. And now, that pressure is visible on track. This is why Silverstone was not just another test. It was a reality check. Because what Red Bull tested there was not just an upgrade package. It was an attempt to correct decisions made at the very foundation of the car. And that is one of the hardest things to do in Formula One. You can change surfaces. You can reduce weight. You can improve airflow. But changing the core concept during the season comes with risk. Every fix creates a new compromise. Every improvement introduces a new variable. And Red Bull is now balancing all of that at the same time. But here is where the situation becomes even more intense. Because they are not alone. While Red Bull is trying to fix a flawed concept, other teams are moving forward without that burden. They are improving performance, not correcting mistakes. Which means Red Bull is fighting two battles at once. Fixing their own car. And chasing rivals who are already ahead. That is why everything now leads to one moment. Miami. That is not just another race. That is the deadline. The point where all these changes, all this pressure, all this hidden work has to deliver. Because if it does, Red Bull comes back into the fight. But if it does not, then the reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is not just a slow start. This is a limitation built into the car from the very beginning. And everything we saw at Silverstone was not the solution. It was the final attempt to prove that the RB22 can still be saved. And this is where everything reaches its limit. Because in Formula One, there is always a point where development stops being a solution and starts becoming damage control. Red Bull is right on that edge. You can see it in the urgency. You can feel it in the way they approached Silverstone. You can hear it in what they are not saying publicly. This is no longer a team calmly building performance. This is a team searching for stability. And those are two completely different situations. Because when you are building performance, every upgrade adds speed. But when you are searching for stability, every upgrade is a risk. It might fix one issue, but create another one somewhere else. And that is exactly the trap Red Bull is trying to avoid right now. Now think about what that means going into Miami. All the data from Silverstone. All the feedback from Verstappen. All the hidden changes to the RB22. Compressed into one package. One version of the car that has to work. Not partially. Not temporarily. Completely. Because if it does, everything changes. The car becomes predictable. The driver regains full confidence. The lap time comes back. And suddenly, Red Bull is no longer chasing. They are fighting again. But if it does not, if even one core issue remains, then the situation becomes very clear. This is not a car that needs more time. This is a car that has already reached its limit. And that is the moment no team wants to face. Because once you accept that, you stop chasing the championship. You start managing the season. And for a team like Red Bull, that is not just a setback. It is a complete shift. From dominance to uncertainty. From control to reaction. And that is why every team in the paddock is watching so closely. Not because they are afraid, but because they are waiting. Waiting to see if this concept works. Or if it becomes a warning. Because if Red Bull solves this, they unlock something no one else has mastered. But if they fail, they expose the limits of this entire design philosophy. So Silverstone was never just a hidden test. It was a signal. A quiet moment that revealed how serious the situation really is. And Miami will not just show lap times. It will reveal the truth. Whether Verstappen's upgrades were the beginning of a comeback, or the final confirmation that the RB22 was compromised long before the season even began.